As some of the Dolphins' intentions become clear, what are the five biggest needs on this roster in 2026? We're going to get into that here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, NFL staff writer for A to Z Sports. Want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Special thank you to each and every one of you who have helped to make the Locked On Podcast Network the number one sports podcast network in the world. Today on the show, I went out and got a recent historical precedent for Austin Jackson and kind of the illusion from John Eric Sullivan that the team would like him to be on the roster, but things, quote unquote, need to sort themselves out. AKA, that feels like a pay cut conversation. So we'll talk about that. I want to talk about a couple of positions that I would not be drafting if I were the Miami Dolphins with their first round draft choice currently scheduled for number 11. But I want to start with an exercise I did yesterday afternoon after the first round of prospect interviews. I came back to the Airbnb that I'm staying at, and I tried my best to define a top 5 of team needs for the Dolphins roster. Spoiler alert, it was hard because I wanted about 8 positions on here, and that math doesn't work, right? So I had to make some decisions to leave some off. So what I want to do is I want to go 5 through 1 and then talk about the positions that ended up on the bubble that didn't make the cut and why I chose to leave what I left off. And that's where we're going to start today. So number 5 for me is the tight end position as far as biggest needs, not because of positional value. There are positions that are traditionally higher positional value groups that did not make this list in lieu of tight end. But tight end is on here because they don't have I don't think they have an ideal 53-man player on the roster right now based off of the injury issue that Jalen Conyers had last year. It's Zach Kuntz, Jalen Conyers, and Cole Turner are the 3 tight ends currently on the roster. Number 4 for me was safety. And this could be a more extreme need than what it is because it currently includes Minkah Fitzpatrick, Dante Trader, Omar Brown. For this regime is Jordan Colbert, a safety or linebacker. He converted to linebacker midway through the season last year. If you keep Minkah Fitzpatrick, I like Dante Trader as a safety 3 that can compete for a top 2 safety spot. But I know how important the safeties were for what happened in Green Bay for Jeff Hafley. And I certainly think there's one that's needed for top 3. And then I think your 4th, if you're going to rely on Omar Brown to do it, like you kind of have a big question mark there too. So I can still really see 2 safeties, whether it's a safety 2, safety 3, or alternatively and a safety 4. And then what happens if you get rid of Minkah, right? Like that group feels like if you trade Minkah, you're very much looking for a definitive starter and somebody else who can be competing for a starting job or at least have like a third safety kind of role with a special teams background as well. So that position group feels kind of wide open for me. Offensive guard came in at number 3. Jonas Savaiinaea obviously is the name who played last year. He struggled last year. No bones about it, right? He kind of felt like he was drinking through a fire hose for the vast majority of the season. I did think he got incrementally better in the back half of the year. I know he didn't finish the year particularly strong. He's a player I'd like to have competition for, and I'm not going to write Jonas Savaiinaea off because he was a second-round rookie that struggled in the NFL. That happens to a lot of offensive linemen who go on to have viable NFL careers as starting players. But I don't think you can comfortably put all your eggs in the basket. The challenge is what kind of signings are you going to have and what kind of resources are you going to have to infuse that much competition where you have these other spots that are also kind of up in the air? It's no guarantee that you're going to get 2 viable starting guards this offseason. I think it's very easily attainable to get 1, but you only currently have 8 picks. You don't have a ton in the way in spending power, and offensive linemen, they get paid, right? So unless Andrew Meyer is able to have that position flex to kick to guard, and we haven't seen it, so we don't know. I have offensive guard, especially with definitively needing 1 starter, very much in that kind of critical mass need. Edge defenders number 2, Chop Robinson, Derek McClendon, Seth Coleman, with Bradley Chubb still technically on the roster, but looming as what will be a post-June 1st cut, I assume, once we get to the first day of the league year, the second week in March. Chop's obviously an NFL player with a first-round pedigree. McClendon, Seth Coleman, what do we have? And I think McClendon can be a viable developmental NFL player, but you probably got 2,000 snaps right now. That's sitting here vacant. And that's a tough place to find yourself. I expect they will sign somebody in free agency here, and then also add a vet min guy, and then I would expect there's going to be a draft focus on the edge as well. That leaves quarterback for number 1, with currently Tua Tagovailoa with the asterisk of probably out the door, Quinn Ewers and Cam Miller. Look, if you have a need at quarterback, it's going to go to the top of the list. That's just the way it works. And John R. Sullivan said so himself when he talked about it starts with quarterback. Now, I think it's of the positions that are listed here, I do believe it's probably the least likely to be sufficiently addressed in one swoop this offseason, just because the Dolphins really don't have the resources to pay a top-of-market player. It's kind of a limited crop in free agency in that regard anyway. The draft is pretty lean. The Dolphins don't have the draft leverage that they would need to get the guy that feels like is on the top of the list. So I don't think quarterback's going to be sufficiently addressed in one fell swoop, but it is the most important issue the Dolphins have. So I left off tackle, and part of the reason I left off tackle was because of this development that happened with Austin Jackson, where John R. Sullivan effectively, and I'm paraphrasing, said on Tuesday to the local beat reporters who were there, I'd like Austin to be a part of the team, but things need to work themselves out. So you have presumably 2 starting tackles. I don't think you have a long-term starting right tackle, but you do have somebody who's got starting experience. You need to cut down on that pressure for that player to be available for 17 games and be such a critical piece of your puzzle. There's no question there. And if the resources were different, if James Daniels broke a different way, maybe you keep James Daniels and you move on from Austin Jackson, and Austin Jackson's the guy who is out. But unfortunately, James Daniels played 3 snaps for you, right? I left off corner. And part of the reason why I left off corner is because I do think you do have Jason Marshall and Juju Brents and Storm Duck. And they were intent on making Storm Duck a player last year. You already have some young competition in the room. Maybe you bring back Rasul Douglas. Maybe you bring back Kader Kohu. Maybe you bring back Jack Jones. I look at that group and I already see like guys who are already under contract. And I say, okay, like, do I think we get a bunch of starters here? No. But I at least appreciate the fact that there's some young competition with some guys that kind of have some commonalities and themes between the physicality of Brents and Marshall and Storm Duck. I think they've already kind of collected a pool there that kind of fuels into what they're going to try to do with these other positions. But we have one proven, and he regressed significantly, outside pass rusher on the roster. We have one starter at guard, and he didn't play particularly well. We have at safety, if Minkah gets moved, it's Dante Trader and Omar Brown. Like that to me is a mission critical that's trumping Marshall, Storm Duck, Juju Brents as a trio of young corners competing. I certainly think they need more. And tight end, like you don't have an current NFL player on the roster with Kuntz, Conyers, and Turner. So I'd love to hear from you guys what you disagreed with. I'm sure there will be a bunch of people that are eager to see corner on that list, but let me know what you would take off, and don't do it through the lens of positional value. Just look at the names and look at the players and say, hey, here's where we're most dire right now. Here's where we really need to get some NFL talent, whether that's a veteran guy with experience or a role player or somebody in the draft. I want to hear from you guys what you disagreed with my list of 5, which was tight end, safety, offensive guard, edge defender, and quarterback. We're going to shift gears, go to that 11th overall pick. That's next. Make sure you guys stick with us. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you need to fill is still sitting open. When the pressure is on and you need the right hire, it's a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. Indeed sponsored jobs helps you reach the people that actually fit what you're looking for from a skills, experience, and location standpoint. So you're not just hoping the right candidate falls into your lap. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute that I've been talking to you, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed sponsored job. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now. Support our show by saying you heard about it on Locked On Dolphins. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions do apply. If you're hiring, do it the right way, because this is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. New Year's rolling. A lot of people trying to get their routines in check, and dinner can be a big one for everybody. Between busy work days, cold winter nights, and packed schedules, having an easy, reliable dinner plan can make a huge difference. That is where Home Chef comes in. Home Chef takes the stress out of cooking by delivering fresh, pre-portioned ingredients right to your door with easy-to-follow recipes that actually taste great. They're rated #1 by users of other meal kits for quality, convenience, value, taste, and recipe ease. And it's easy to see why. For a limited time, Home Chef is offering our listeners 50% off your first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life when you go to homechef.com/lockedon. That's homechef.com/lockedon for 50% off your first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life. Must be an active subscriber to receive the free dessert. Dolphins draft plans at 11. Consider it wide open, right? They're going to tell you they are a best player available team. But I do think there are some guidelines and pillars that are probably appropriate for a team that is facing what the Dolphins are facing from a build standpoint. Like, there's certain positions I just don't, I would not be able to justify. And if you've got running backs on the list, right, with where the Dolphins are right now, you could tell me Jeremiah Love is the best player available, and I can't get there to draft him at 11. Like, I would have a really hard time with that. So if he's head and shoulders the best player on the board when you pick at 11 and Jeremiah Love is there, I would try to leverage that into, does anybody want to come get Jeremiah Love, right? Does anybody have an interest in him as a player? Because I fundamentally, picking a running back at 11 for a team that is facing the window of opportunity in which it is, it's one thing to say I'd pay Devon Achane, because you don't, after you move on from Tua and potentially Minkah Fitzpatrick and Austin Jackson, whatever happens there happens. He's still in a contract year in 2026. Your long-term players to pay list is significantly reduced. So I think it's one thing to say, hey, I'll pay Devon Achane because we're not really paying a lot of people for 2027 and beyond. And because he's already here and there's inherently more value there, and there's not an opportunity cost because I don't have to choose between paying Devon Achane and paying somebody else, not with where the Dolphins are at now. But when you make a draft choice, that you only get to make that choice once for one player. And when it becomes an opportunity cost thing instead of just a cash budget cost, that for me is where I am on board paying Devon Achane an extension to stay with the Dolphins, despite what the team forecast looks like for 2026. I'm not on board with using a first-round pick at a running back, even if he is the best true player available, because it comes at the opportunity cost of drafting somebody else at a different position. Other positions, obviously specialists are in that tier as well. In this year's class, assuming that Fernando Mendoza goes number 1 overall, I would say quarterback at 11 is generally a non-starter for me. Like, I don't see Ty Simpson in that light. Beyond those two, running back and then quarterback in a non-quarterback here at 11 this year. And that's running backs. That one for me is a little bit more of a fundamental, like universal piece. If you're a team that is drafting and in the start of a rebuild versus just this year's quarterback class being what it is. I can get on board with a wide receiver. I can get on board with a tight end in Kenyon Sadiq. I can get on board with, now I'd be a little leery about Jordan Tyson at Arizona. The medical stuff there is a little scary. I don't really feel like Mekhi Lemon's like that stratosphere. So I wouldn't love wide receiver versus some of your other options. Like, I just don't view the wide receiver class like that as we get closer to the draft. But I think Kenyon Sadiq, I know he plays tight end. If you told me authentically he's the best player available, he can impact the run and the pass game. He could be a blocker. He could be on the core. He can help your protection stuff. There's enough value for if you feel like he is a true difference maker tight end. I'd be totally fine with that. Offensive tackle, you're obviously on board with. I'm on board with drafting offensive guard. There's no centers that are in this conversation for the draft, but I would go at either spot on the offensive line, interior or on the edge. I'd be on board with. Obviously on board with edge on defense. I'd even be on board with defensive tackle. Like, I have my questions about Peter Woods from Clemson, but you go back and watch the 24 tape and you see a player who could be a splash difference maker. If the Dolphins with Jeff Hafley look at what they have in Kenneth Grant, they look at what they have in Jordan Phillips, and if they look at what they have in Zeke Biggers, and they feel like, hey, we're missing or we've got room for another piece here, and obviously Zach Sealer's a mature contract guy, I can get on board with that too. If you feel like he's the best player available in your assessment, okay, no hold bars. You can put guys in a lot of different spots in the offensive line, and if you want to have like an obnoxiously deep group that rotates and stays fresh and attacks, I'm okay with that. Would I be head over heels with it relative to what you could potentially do to address some of the needs that we just talked about on the roster? Probably not, but I wouldn't say it's like a non-starter. I'm on board with linebacker with Sonny Styles. I'm on board with corner. I think there's two corners. Mansour Delane is my personal favorite. And I'm on board with safety with Caleb Downs. So really, for me, it's like center, just because there's no centers. Quarterback, because there's no quarterbacks at that juncture at 11. Running back fundamentally. Specialists. Anything other than that, I'd consider it wide open. It should be considered, in my opinion, wide open. Talk a little bit about Austin Jackson. Did a little legwork there. Feel like I got us somewhere where I've got a recent historical precedent for this thing that we're talking about with potentially reworking his contract. We're getting to that next. Make sure you guys stick with us. You ever wanted to experience the NBA Finals live and in person? FanDuel is giving you the chance to turn that dream into reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. Use your profit boost on any NBA future, and you'll automatically be entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for two. That's right. Flights, tickets, the whole experience. So if you're looking at the board, thinking about which team can make a deep run, this is the perfect time to lock it in. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right. So Austin Jackson, and we got this breadcrumb on Tuesday. John Eric Sullivan would like to have him on the team. Right, as my hair's going crazy this morning. It's the bedhead. A couple late nights in Indy. I went back and I looked at right tackle salaries, and the intention of doing it was really just, okay, where's the right dollar amount was kind of the original intention of why I went out looking at right tackle salaries. All right, it's as good as the hair is going to get. And there was a name that jumped off to me right away. And then I looked at his contract and I realized, oh yeah, he was in a contract year last year, signed a big money contract. And this team actually renegotiated his salary down because he was having a hard time staying healthy and playing as many games as he was supposed to. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Starting right tackle, paid a contract extension, struggles with durability, going into a contract year, renegotiates his contract and takes pay cut. That sounds like the plan until the last piece is Austin Jackson. The actual name that's invoked here is Braden Smith with the Colts. Braden Smith signed a 4-year, $70 million contract extension and missed 18 games in 4 seasons. The year he signed the extension, the first 3 years of the deal. And the Colts were supposed to pay him last year in a contract year, $14.75 million. Okay, so that's more than $3 million more than what Austin Jackson was supposed to get. He ended up playing this year for $8 million in total opportunity of compensation. He came in just under that because they put money in like per game active bonuses. Every game that you dress up and suit up for, you get a portion of up to a certain amount of money at the end of the year if you play all 17 games. So his salary nearly got cut in half, 14.75 to 8. And $2 million of that was a roster bonus that he got up front. A little over $2 million of that was in playtime incentives, and a $3.96 million base to cut it to $8 million. That's the playbook. And I think that's the approach. If you want things to work out with Austin, and you take whatever his salary is, you have a number in your mind that you want to try to get to. You get as close to that number as you can. You probably variably say, okay, maybe we're comfortable with this as the guarantees, whether it's 3.5 in base and then $1.5 million roster bonus for 5, and then we'll give you another 2 or 2.5 that's directly tied to how many games you play. And now you're, for Austin, that would be considered a non-likely to be earned performance incentive based off of the definition for the salary cap purposes, right? Like that's no shade. I know some people have seen not likely to be earned and they think that's like a jab and a knife twist at a player. It's an actual definition for salary cap purposes. And it's, did you achieve that thing last year? Or are there multiple layers? Is it you have to play and dress in the game and then Bradley Chubb be top 20 in scoring defense? And if both of those things happen, you don't get the money. And that's what happened with Bradley Chubb. And that's why his cap charge was down despite having all of that earnings potential, because it was considered not likely to be earned. Performance incentives. That for me is the blueprint for Austin Jackson. Get to a number and negotiate a number and figure out what you want to pay up front as a base. And then if you want to barter and they want to get closer to 11.5, which is what he's currently scheduled to make, put it in per game dressed bonuses. And then that way, if he's going to get up to whatever the max earnings are, it's because he went out and played and earned it. And Braden Smith did that and played 13 games this year, which was the most games he's played in 3 seasons. And if he doesn't play, then okay, you had a starting right tackle for half the season and you paid him half the salary. And it's much more proportionate that way. So that's the historical example from just last year where the Colts had a very similar saga with Austin, or with Braden Smith is what the Dolphins have with Austin Jackson. And that would be what I would be looking to do if I were the Dolphins, would be replicating proportionately that, and Smith went from 14.75 to $8 million in earnings opportunities. Can you get Austin Jackson to 6.5, 7? Can you get him down? And that's with the playtime incentives. Now you obviously you're not offloading the cap, but they do have only so many resources on hand and at their disposal. So that's my thoughts on the historical precedent for something the Dolphins could do with Austin Jackson that might be worth monitoring. That's going to do it for us here today on the show. Kyle Krabs, keep it locked in. I got to roll up and get out of here. I got to head over to the convention center. We got defensive backs today for press availability this morning. So I did some podiums yesterday, talked to a couple players. Josh Josephs, the pass rusher from Tennessee. I got my eye on you, young man. I really enjoyed the quick conversation I had with him with a couple questions about rushing the passer. We'll get into all that stuff once we debrief from the combine. So Kyle Krabs, keep it locked in here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. I appreciate you guys as always for checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your day. I am out of here. Go Fins.